on your videos. So, we are studying chapter 2 of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where Sutta Goswami has begun to answer the questions of Shaunakadi rishis assembled in Naimisharanya. So, the first answer Sutta Goswami provides is Savai Pumsa Paro Dharmo Yato Bhaktir Adhokshache. That the Ekanta, the Shreya, the ultimate good for humanity is sadhana bhakti, which gives rise to prema bhakti. Yeah. And Vasudeva Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita. That kind of bhakti very quickly gives birth to jnana and vairagya. And then what is not parodharma was discussed that if our varnashram duties do not give rise to a taste in Krishna Katha, then they are just considered a useless labor. So now Sutta Goswami describes the nature of this dharma, which he is describing some very beautiful and important verses we'll be discussing today. There are nuances in these details in the philosophical discussion. So if you're attentive, you'll be able to grasp it. If you look at it in a generic sense, you might lose a lot of the details. So let's start and take the first verse, verse 9. Let's chant. Dharmasya hi apavargasya nartho arthayopakalpate narthasya dharma ekantasya kamo labha hi smritaha. So now that we are talking about dharma, what is dharma and how does dharma work? This is described in two verses, 9 and 10. The translation is, all occupational engagements are certainly meant for ultimate liberation. Please also pay attention to the synonyms. All occupational engagements, which are called dharma, they are meant for ultimate liberation. Apavargasya. Apavarga is a word used for liberation. So apavargasya means for the purpose of liberation. So all occupational engagements are certainly meant for ultimate liberation. Na arthaha. Artha means the goal or the end. Why are you doing something? What is the artha in this pursuit? What should not be the artha when you are performing dharma? Na artha arthaya upakalpate. Arthaya, that means material gain. That should not be the artha or purpose of dharma. Yeah. They should never be performed for material gain. Furthermore, according to the sages, one who is engaged in the ultimate occupational service, dharma eikantasya, if you're on the path of dharma eikantasya, considering that to be your primary priority and purpose in life, for them, they should never use material gain, arthaya, to cultivate sense gratification, kamo labhaya. Don't use artha for kama if your pursuit and purpose is dharma. So this is very beautiful. It just gives a reality check to how we perceive dharma in this world. Yeah. So let's look at it again. All dharma is meant for apavarg, apavargasya. Yeah. Dharma should not be performed for artha. Na, artha means the end goal of dharma should not be arthaya upakalpate, to obtain arthaya. Okay. And those who are on the path of dharma, dharma ekantasya, na arthasya, they should never use material gain for sense indulgence, sense gratification. So this is a very beautiful, uh, you know, eye-opening verse, actually. So here, let's understand what is being presented. That, you know, let's look at this cycle. Let me share a slide with you. Yes, can you see it now? So what happens is from the performance of dharma, can you see the slide or are you seeing something else?
We can see. We can see, Prabhuji.
The slide, right? Not the text.
It's only we are seeing a cycle, Prabhuji, like a cycle
Yeah,
path of
perfect.
karma.
Perfect. Sure. So let's look at this. What happens? Mahabharata says when you perform dharma, it gives rise to artha and kama. But Mahabharata asks this question that is there no other purpose of dharma? So yes, the result of performing dharma is artha. Please note the meaning of each word. The result of performance of dharma is artha. Artha we are calling as acquisition of material results. When you have material acquisition, that is artha. Economic gain, material acquisition, that is artha. So the result of performing dharma is material acquisition. The result of what happens when you have material acquisition, what's the natural next step? You have desire. Desire is referring to karma. And what is the result of karma? When you have desires, what do you want to do? You want to give pleasure to the senses. Yeah, that's called Indriya Priti. We'll see that word introduced in the next verse. And when you see your senses are pleased, how? By fulfilling your desire from the acquisition of, material assets. When you see that the senses are pleased, what do you want to do? You want to gain further pleasure. And then you start the sequence again from there. So this is the cycle, cycle of futility. Why is it futile? We'll see very soon. But first, we have to understand this. Performance of dharma is leading to artha, material acquisition. Material acquisition is leading to desire, kama. Kama is leading to pleasure of the senses. And when the senses are pleased, we want to start all over again and keep doing it, and keep accumulating it. It never ends. So, what is the point? So, dharma means different things for different types of people in this world. For the jnani, dharma means controlling mind and senses, shama, dama, and all the other processes. For a yogi, dharma means yama, niyama. That's the path they are on. And for a devotee, what does dharma mean? Paro dharma, shravanam, kirtanam, smaranam. So for different categories of individuals, dharma takes on different meanings. So even though performance of dharma may lead to material results, that should not be considered the goal. Arthaya na kalpate. Is this clear? This is the very first step. Dharmasya. Nartho arthaya kalpate. The goal of performing dharma should not be obtaining artha. It might come, but that should not be the goal. Yeah. Why? Because when you examine the nature of the artha that you gain, in Bhagavad Gita, Shri Krishna beautifully says, what is the meaning of jnana? Jnana means to know the true nature of material objects. When you can see that material objects have a wrapper of, pleasure, but they contain suffering within, that is when you are able to see the true nature of material objects. That jnana is what leads to detachment. So when you actually examine material objects, you see that, oh, they are not actually, you know, satisfying. You become detached from it. And then you pursue a spiritual goal of liberation or apavargasya. Yeah. So for a jnani and yogi, apavargya is liberation. For a devotee, apavarga is prema bhakti. So when we are able to examine the limitation, yeah, or the true nature of artha, we stop there. Yeah, we break the cycle there. That's demonstrated in the next slide. Have a look. So what happens here is once you understand the real nature of material objects, you say no, that artha is not the end goal of my occupational pursuit, occupational duty. Yeah, I want to direct my energy towards apavarga, which means liberation for yogis and jnanis, and which means prema bhakti for the devotees. So this is how we break that cycle by the power of jnana, by knowing the limitation of sense enjoyment or the nature of material objects. Okay, is this clear? So we see in the 18th chapter of the first canto itself that Maharaj Parikshit is explained as his intelligence was fixed on apavarga. Although he was a king, his intelligence was clearly fixed on apavarga. That is how we should approach this. So when we are performing dharma, it should not be to attain material results. Yeah. Arthasya kamo labhaya na. Not for attaining material gain. Then what should we do it for? For the purpose of apavarga. The beauty is that the practice of apavarga contains its own results. You're not doing it for the results, but the path of pursuing apavarga contains its own result. Yeah, so let's see what Srila Prabhupada says here. That we have just seen in the previous verse that bhakti gives rise to jnana and vairagya. But there are others who look at religion as a means for material gain. Yeah. In general, it's the tendency of ordinary people. They want some material profit in exchange of any occupation, any service, even religious service that they do. Yeah, therefore, Vedic literatures also who want to bring these people into the Vedic fold. Okay, pursue your desires, but do it in a dharmic way. So those Vedic literatures also offer such allurements. Yeah, there are, you do this yagya, you get this fruit. So there is an allurement like a carrot, because that is what most people are attracted to. Some blessings or some prosperity. There is actually a church of prosperity gospel. So it's like mainstream. So even, I mean, they might be seen as religious people, but they're still allured by material gain. They're using religion as a means for material gain. Why? Because we saw material gain fulfills your desires, kama. And fulfilling your desires, kama leads to indriya priti, pleasure to the senses. So that cycle is the cycle of futility. Because you want pleasure of the senses, you even approach dharma with the same attitude. Sense gratification is the general way for all sorts of fully occupied men. But here Sutta Goswami is that verdict of Srimad Bhagavatam in this statement of Sutta Goswami. Through that, he is nullifying that idea that that is not the right way to live. So one should not engage himself in any sort of occupational service for material gain only. Yeah. And then, okay, you would say, okay, if I should not do it for artha, but you said performing of dharma inevitably leads to artha. So what should I do with that artha? That is presented in the next verse, the 10th verse. Let's chant. Kamasya nindriya pritir labho jivata yavata jivasya tattva jigyasa nartho yes cheha karma vihi. So life's desires should never be directed towards sense gratification. Kama should not be used to serve indriya priti. Break that loop in our mind. One should desire only a healthy life, jiveta, self-preservation, just maintenance, not extravagance. One should desire only a healthy life or self-preservation. Why? Since a human being is meant for inquiry into the absolute truth. Jivasya Tattva-Jijnasa. Nothing else should be the goal of one's work. Na artho yas cheha karma bhi. So all the karma that we do, occupational duties, which verse 9 called as dharmasya, here verse 10 is calling it karma bhi. All occupational engagement. This should never be employed for anything other than tattva jigyasa. So this is a very deep statement to make. It changes the way you direct your life's energy. Yeah. So here Prabhupada starts by saying that currently the civilization is bewildered. It's wrongly directed towards just fulfilling our desires in Indriya Priti. Indriya Priti is the sole purpose of all our endeavor, individually and collectively. And it is present in all spheres of life. Mm. You've seen this, Prabhupada says, that Indriya Priti could be concentrated or expanded for ourselves or for family, society, nation, humanity. The idea is, in the ultimate end, it is sense gratification because there is that same tint of sense gratification is ever increasingly predominant. So look at this slide where when we direct our occupational duties and the mindset is still materialistic. So it can take any shape, but it is still sense gratification. Yeah. Because at the end, it is concerning my desire, my sense gratification, my indriya priti. So Prabhupada says we can see this in all spheres of life. In politics, if people, how do people elect a leader? They'll elect that leader who promises their indriya priti. Yeah. And as soon as they are dissatisfied in their indriya priti, they'll dethrone the same leaders who they appointed. And it is the, you know, course of um, life that no leader can endlessly give indriya priti to the followers. They can give out subsidies, free dole outs. That is how they get elected. But sooner or later, they'll not be able to meet the desires of the voters. So they'll disappoint them. and then they are dethroned. So this happens in all fields of life. Yeah. No one is serious about the problems of life. So we are just, you know, giving power to those who promise us Indriya Priti, but who is talking about Tattva-Jijnasa? That is supposed to be the focus of human existence, right? To find out the cause, to find out a purpose, to learn to direct our energy. So nobody is talking about that. Even those who are on the path of salvation, the Mayavadis, they want to become one with the absolute. Basically, they want to commit spiritual suicide. So that is also an Indriya Preeti. They are Indriya Preetis of a mystical flavor. Yeah, their Indriya Preeti is not like that of karmis who want some material acquisition for some sense pleasure. The Jnanis and the Mayavadis Indriya Preeti is, I want to become one with Brahman. So that is spiritual suicide for sense gratification, Prabhupada writes. So we should not live for sense gratification. We do have senses, and the senses require a certain amount of satisfaction. Scriptures are not denying that. But as we discussed, the scriptures are giving us a regulative framework to obtain that satisfaction, not gratification. So we live a dharmic life for, say, satisfaction. We satisfy the senses also. We are not, asking anyone to repress or torture themselves. That's jiveta, self-preservation, but not indulgence or gratification. So Vedas give us the boundary, the framework in which you can satisfy your senses, but not unrestrictedly, not recklessly, not obsessively. So Prabhupada gives an example of marriage that yes, we can give satisfaction to the senses, but it should be consecrated in a dharmic way. Yeah, it is not meant for sense enjoyment. So if people are focused towards tattva jigyasa and they pursue satisfaction of the senses through dharmic ways, there'll be no problem, for which then there is so much propaganda of family planning. Prabhupada says family planning is automatically executed as soon as there is search after the absolute truth. Because those who are seekers of the absolute truth, those who are interested in tattva jigyasa, they are not allured by unnecessary engagements in sense gratification because they are serious students seeking the absolute truth. So those who are focused on tattva jigyasa, they don't make indriya priti the focus of their lives, and naturally then society will be harmonious. You don't have to create artificial policies. So therefore, in every sphere of life, the ultimate end must be seeking after the absolute truth. And only that will make you happy. Why? Because we'll not dissipate our energies in sense gratification, karma, and indriya priti. We'll redirect it to what really matters, which is tattva jigyasa. Mm. So, indriya priti is the main thing. There are some more slides I'd like to show you. It takes a while to transition. Yeah, very beautifully explained. And if you just take this to heart, you live with such clarity and you know purpose in life. So here, what is being said is what is indriya priti, the pleasure of the senses. When we come in touch, when our senses come in touch with sense objects, it gives rise to indriya priti. That should not be the goal of artha. Yeah, dharma should not be to obtain artha, and artha should never be used in the service of kama. desires, which lead to Indriya Priti. So we need to break that chain. So what should we be living for then? Yavat Jiveta. As long as you're living, you should live for Apavarga, the real purpose of life. So here is a nice depiction of that. That once we understand this, we live a life of self-preservation. We sense satisfaction is there, but we restrict that desire to a healthy maintenance, self-preservation. What you need to function and be peaceful. That's Jiveta. So that you increase, and Indriya Priti you reduce. That which is unrestricted enjoyment, because our energy is wasted and we lose focus. So this is how we should increase the proportion of, you know, self-preservation and reduce the proportion of Indriya Priti. There are very two opposite ways of living life. What is your focus and what do you consider as human flourishing? We have to redefine success. If you are a spiritualist, you cannot consider Indriya Priti to be success. That's animalistic. Jiveta, self-preservation, so that you can conserve your energy for the right cause. And what is that? Okay. Yeah. So Jiveta, that is your energy. Minimum energy should go for maintenance. What you require, food, shelter, health. That's the absolute minimum required for bodily maintenance. So that that foundation should be as small as necessary to support the true work, which is Tattva-Jijnasa, yeah, spiritual research. So this is how our life should be constructed. Tattva-Jijnasa should take the majority of our time, intellect, and energy. Yeah, and that's where we should direct it. Expanding infinitely into spiritual research and realization. So you have two ways to live, Indriya Priti or Tattva Jigyasa. So if you are Srimad Bhagavatam, Sutta Goswami is saying Tattva Jigyasa should consume your majority of your intellect, energy, and time. And how will you be able to do that? If you focus on Jiveta, self-preservation, not Indriya Priti. Otherwise, we go back to that cycle. So this is how our life should be structured. Whatever, our dharma is, occupational engagement, that dharma and kama, desires, they should act as the foundation or the scaffolding. They should exist to support and elevate tattva jigyasa, which is on the top. So this is how we should structure life. Dharma is to pursue apavarga, yeah, not artha, first lesson. And kama should be for jiveta, self-preservation, not indriya priti, second lesson. And when you structure both of these compartments of life, you can prioritize tattva jigyasa. And for a second, you can think how our life is currently structured. Is it anywhere close to this? So we have to bring it close to this. That's what Sutta Goswami is advising us. Okay, does it make sense? Dharma for apavargya, not artha, and kama not for indriya priti, but for jiveta. Yes, Prabhu.
Sorry, Prabhu. I mean, it's very confusing. Like dharma or occupational duty, we're doing only for end of the day. We're doing it for artha. We're doing it to get artha,
Hmm.
or money in some sense. That
Hmm.
earth is being spent in different ways. That can be spent for self-preservation, that can be spent for sustenance, for family maintenance, for service to the lordships. But how can dharma be done directly for Apavarga? Because the occupational duty is not going to lead us directly to Apavarga.
We discussed that dharma, performance of dharma will lead to artha. So we don't have a problem with artha. What did we say? That artha should not be the goal. Na artha arthaya kalpate. Arth ko hi end nahi bana dena. It may be a means to achieve other things you are saying. You can use it in the service of jiveta, self-preservation, in the service of apavarga. Yeah. So if it is the means and not the end, that's perfect. We are saying don't utilize dharma to make artha the end goal.
And Prabhu, Jiveta itself is different. The Jiveta parameters are so different for every. I mean, are these standard for everybody, or are they going to be different from individual to individual, circumstance to
We are not
circumstance?
talking of, sure, we are not talking of the absolute quantity, we are talking of proportions. And according to your situation, according to your, what makes you peaceful and satisfied, the proportion of jiveta should be the basis, and then the major focus of life should be tattva-jijnasa. Not that we create an elaborate, web of indriya priti and which is driven by unrestricted karma. So point is, whatever is for somebody, jiveta might be 10 units. For someone else, it might be 20 units. But point is, simple living, high thinking. At least majority of your energy should be in tattva jigyasa and rest in jiveta. It's a conception. It's a principle of how to structure our life.
Let me change the scenario a little bit, Prabhu. Sorry, this I'm going into a bit more detail, taking some more time on this. So,
Sure.
dharma is being done to gain artha. That's the first step which is happening. Now that
It
artha,
it results in artha, but we don't do it to get artha. You see the difference? धर्म करने से अर्थ और काम आएंगे, रिजल्ट है उसका, बट यू आर नॉट डूइंग इट फॉर द पर्पस ऑफ अर्थ एंड काम. You are doing it for the purpose of apavarga. What is
Prabhu,
the
even for
intention?
jiveta artha is required in today's scenario. Even for jiveta, you need artha. So dharma,
Yeah.
the way I am doing it, I'm doing dharma to gain artha. Artha is being used for jiveta, and a part of it is being used for kama, and a part of it is being used for tattva jigyasa. So if I would put in three buckets,
No, bro, that is not what we are understanding. Part of it cannot be for jivata, part for kama. The point is that is being said here is kama should be directed to jivata, not indriya priti. Kam leads to two, kam forks out in two directions. You can fulfill your desires in the way of indriya priti or in the way of jivata. So this verse is saying jiveta में अपना अर्थ engage करो, क्योंकि इंद्रिय प्रीति is there is no upper limit to it. So yes, we utilize our artha, but in what spirit?
jiveta
And
spirit.
it is not the end goal of doing dharma. Then it will be, it is materialism only in the name of religiosity. So these are very strong verses. They shake you to the core. That's why they are important. And that's
Then
why
to
Sutta
Prabhu,
Goswami is setting it out right at the start.
yeah, I mean this goes back to the Kaitava dharma. This is
Yes.
an extension of the same. Prabhu, a little different question in the same context. So when dharma is done and artha is attained, and that artha, there is a part which is used in jiveta, and there
Hmm.
is some part which is used in tattva jigyasa, and then there is some part which, if it is kept as a guarantee for future or saving for future or as a retirement, would that be considered wrong? Because certain phases of life, certain ages you get to, then the motive
Mm,
of that artha also changes. Because at certain, like when you get to a midlife, you're looking at this artha now has to sustain the later years. So my preference would then become parking that for sustenance in the later years rather than giving them in, or donating them in Tattva-Jijnasa today. So doing
mm.
Jiveta, saving and little to Tattva-Jijnasa. So would that be considered also wrong?
Right. I hear you, a very sincere question. I mean, we have to act according to our varnashram. If you are a sannyasi or a brahmachari, then you don't need to, save. You are supposed to live simply, day to day, with no security of the future. But if you're not in that ashram, then 100% life is a cycle. There are cycles of earning and there are cycles of, when you need them. It's not going to be one is to one match. That's how life works. So I would still consider it to be a part of Jiveta if your heart is, invested in upper work. That I want to pursue spirituality, but I'm securing my future. That's perfectly okay. But
As long
point
as
is
that
that as long as it doesn't slip into Indriya Preeti.
it doesn't go into fulfilling the karma and
Yeah.
Indriya Preeti, which
So
is
it
very
starts
difficult
with
to do.
that. It starts with the idea of I'll use this corpus for sustaining securing my future. But yeah, it may take different forms.
So
But
we,
yeah.
when we feel like eating pizza, we offer pizza to Krishna. So in there,
Yeah.
these guys look so far out that
Oh no. But it's important to, understand it, what's happening when there is happiness or distress in the life of a jnani or a yogi. They attribute it to karma because, it contains karma also. If you remember Bhagavad Gita, performing nishkama karma leads to jnana. So, and for a jnani or a yogi, the pleasure and that's coming up. Let's take it. Where is it? Anyways, for yogis and jnanis, any pleasure or pain they experience, they attribute it to karma because the process of jnana and yoga contains karma, nishkam karma. But bhakti is not like that. The happiness or misery that a devotee experiences is not due to karma because bhakti has no karma involved. So a devotee experiencing happiness or misery is only either due to either of two things. One is Lord's personal desire. Yasyaham anugrahanami harishyeta vadhanam shanai. To those who I am especially favorable, I take away their possessions so they have no shelter but me. That is one reason why a devotee can experience happiness or distress. And the second is offenses. Suffering in the life of a devotee can come because of the offenses one might have committed. There is no karma involved in a bhakta's life. So yeah, I mean, even if you're experiencing any happiness, you can give it a spiritual cause. Krishna wants you to be happy in devotional service. Chant and be happy. Chant purely.
and at what stage can one consider himself or herself a bhakta, Prabhu?
We are on the path. We are sadhaka bhaktas. We are Vaidhi sadhak bhaktas. And we are trying to reach a stage where we stop identifying with body mind and start identifying with the soul. That is when we'll be convinced that I just need to do Shravan, Kirtan, Smaran. I don't need to do any sort of karma. So we are hoping, aspiring to reach that stage. That is when pure bhakti actually begins.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, I just wanted to understand a little bit more when we say Tattva-Jijnasa, is it
Mhm.
referring to the sadhana bhakti itself, or like inquiry as in what? Like what does it constitute of?
Right. Basically, it is indicating a spiritual pursuit, that we prioritize spiritual pursuit. Yeah, you remember the first verse we discussed, that Vedanta Sutra starts with Adhato Brahma Jigyasa, and Srimad Bhagavatam first verse says Satyam
Yeah.
Param Dhimahi. So that Jigyasa, the inquiry, concludes in meditation. So meditation, worship, devotion, this is all Tattva Jigyasa, spiritual real research and realization. So a life dedicated to spiritual realization is Tattva Jigyasa.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay. Yes, Master.
Sure. There are two questions. The first one is that dharma has been used in three contexts in scripture. The first one is a spiritual anchor. The second is, as we
Mm.
said here also, a occupational activity. And the third one is the universal order, spiritual order. So
Mm.
that my question was, with this text, how are we tapping into each of those aspects of dharma? My second question was from Bhagavad Gita 5.1 through 5.10. There's a very beautiful conversation between Arjuna and Krishna about, first of all, which is better, renunciation of work or performance of work?
Oh.
And then, so Krishna answers that and gives the metaphor in 5.10 about, being the lotus leaf on the tree. But I really wanted to understand that from the purpose of what we're learning in these answers by Shukadeva as well. So if you could just, help me with these two anchors.
Sure, sure. Yeah, those are very relevant questions, very good questions. First is definitely dharma has, it's a very deep term with various imports, and we have to see it contextually. A lot of times, dharma is used to indicate your swarupa. What's your that part of you which cannot be separated from you? Otherwise, you cease to be. That's nature. Here in these verses, dharma is being used to indicate your karma. What do you do while you are here in this world? So, working, what should your work lead to? That is being. So, in this context, dharma is referring to varnashram dharma, your duties, your swadharma according to your specific situation in the varna ashram matrix. So, how should we utilize it? Not for artha, but for apavarga, basically for bhakti. So don't, direct your work. Same thing with Sri Krishna is saying in the Bhagavad Gita. If you act yagyartha karmanonyatra lokoyam karma bandhana. If you act in the spirit of yagya, if you offer your work to me, then you will attain freedom. But if you act for out of selfishness, that same work will become a cause of your bondage. So here Shri Krishna is saying that, Shukdev Goswami, Sutta Goswami is saying the same thing. Occupation should not be directed towards artha, which means karma bandhan. It should instead be directed to apavarga, which is yagyartha karma. And apavarga here takes it way beyond uh, yagyartha karma. It takes it to bhakti. Do it for attaining bhakti of Krishna. And yeah, these are the two. So we are still exploring the purport. Srila Prabhupada says, one should satisfy the senses only in so much as required for self-preservation and not sense gratification. Because the body is made of senses, which also require a certain amount of satisfaction, there are regulative directions for satisfaction of such senses. Beautifully, Prabhupada is summarizing. It's not sense gratification, but satisfaction is permitted. So here, furthermore, like, we were discussing that, um, yeah. So for a devotee, dharma is referring to Shravanam Kirtanam. And for a jnani, it is referring to mind and sense control. And for a yogi, it is referring to yam, niyama, and so on. So according to, the guna of the person, they will choose different destinations. And for that destination, they'll choose a specific sadhana. But here, Sutta Goswami is saying, act for apavarga. So we did discuss this that uh, Jnana and yoga are transformations of nishkam karma only. Therefore, the happiness and distress the jnanis and yogis experience are a result of karma. But for devotees, yeah, that cannot be called as the fruits of karma because bhakti is not a transformation of karma like jnana and yoga are. Yeah. So the happiness that a devotee would perceive is a result of bhakti only. Yeah. Krishna is intervening, direct action of the Lord, or some devotional offenses. That is how we can, trace back the happiness or misery in the life of a devotee vis-a-vis the happiness and distress in the life of a jnani or yogi. This is very critical. Hope you caught this, that because jnana and yoga are transformations of karma, the happiness and distress experienced by those practitioners is attributable to karma. But because bhakti is not a transformation of karma, the happiness and distress experienced by a devotee is not attributable to karma, but to the action of the Lord or offenses. Okay, so this was these two verses. I mean, they're very beautiful, and they're so meditative. You can just post it on your study table, and it just gives so much clarity in our day-to-day life. Okay, so we proceed. Are things clear? So now we should act for Tattva-Jijnasa. What is this Tattva? Can you tell me? So that is explained in the next verse. These verses are so packed with meaning that, we are taking time to unpack them. They are very pregnant with meaning. So we will not rush, but these are foundational verses for our, journey ahead. So this is verse 11. What is Tattva-Jijnasa? Vadanti tat tattvavidas tattvam yadjnanam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavaniti shabdyate. Very beautiful, very often quoted verse. Learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramatma, or Bhagwan. Prabhupada has made the definition so precise. That's eloquence when you can really capture everything without becoming verbose. So Prabhupada has packed so much into this. Learned transcendentalist are Tattva-Vidas. Tattva-Vida means those who have seen or realized the Tattva. Vadanti, they say that absolute truth. Hmm, what is that absolute truth? They define the absolute truth as Jnanam Advayam. Absolute truth, Satyam Param is Advaya, non-dual knowledge. And that absolute truth can be perceived or approached in three perspectives, three levels, which are Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagwan. So, what is Advaya-jnanam? Have you heard of this word before? Advayam-jnanam. This is the language of the Upanishads, actually. Yeah, it is what it is. The language of Srimad Bhagavatam, you see, when Param Satya was introduced in the first verse, it didn't make it so abstract. It said, Janmadiyasya yatha, Swarat, Abhigya Swarat, Tene Brahma Hridaya. So it was giving theological attributes of Satyam Param. But Upanishads don't speak like that. Upanishads make it very abstract in principle terms. That absolute truth is Advaita. Yeah. So if you're interested, we could spend a little time in understanding this. Yeah, it's not part of the PowerPoint, but this will keep repeating. You will find this everywhere. So, and if you're not clear, you'll not really relish what is being said. So in Taittiriya Upanishad, yeah, that Brahman is defined as there's this verse in Taittiriya Upanishad which says Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. What does it mean? Brahman is that reality which is absolute existence, pure consciousness, and unlimited fullness. Okay, so it's simple. Trust me. Brahman is that reality. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. Brahma. So, what is the nature of Brahman? Three things: Satyam, Jnanam, and Ananta. So, let's try to understand what is Satyam. Satyam means this, the word Satyam is so powerful. It is not just truth, it is what is ultimately real. Yeah, something that is never changing. In our world, in our Jagat, Jagat is ever changing. Bodies change, societies change, emotions change, even Swarga situation changes. But Brahman is unchanging. It is Satya. What kind of Satya? It is said it is a, Trikala Abadit Satya, which means Brahman is the same in past, present, and future. So basically, it is trying to say this is our world is a world of relative reality, but Brahman is ultimate reality. You understand the difference? We think it is real. Tejovari Mrigam, Mrisha, first verse. We might think it is real, but it is only relatively real. Only Brahman is ultimately real. It is never changing and it is not dependent on anything or anyone. That is the deep meaning of Satyam. So Brahman is that foundational reality which will never change. Yeah, it'll never be destroyed, it'll never become dependent on anything else. So that's Satyam, solid. Then Jnanam. Jnanam is not knowledge, Jnanam is consciousness. So Brahman is consciousness itself, pure consciousness. Hmm. When we say Brahman is Jnanam, that means Brahman is uncontaminated, pure consciousness. There is nothing else in Brahman. And that, what is the nature of that consciousness? It is self-aware, Swayam Prakash. Like there is some object which is to be known, but the object doesn't know itself or anything else. So this is not conscious. Mind is also processing knowledge, but from a higher point of view, mind itself can be observed. Yeah. But that is not how Brahman is. Brahman is consciousness itself. Yeah. So it is not Jad, it is Chit Swarup. That is the term used. By nature, by Swarup, it is Chit. It is conscious. So when we say we as a spirit soul are conscious, it is that same consciousness. But in Brahman, it is present in its fullness. Brahman is only pure consciousness. So that's what, these yogis and jnanis attempt to do. They are not focusing their consciousness on Bhagavan. They want to become conscious of consciousness itself. That's why they keep saying, yeah, this Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahman. This is their Mahamatra. Because they want to become conscious of consciousness alone, not Krishna conscious. So the object of meditation is so different. So this is the meaning of Jnanam. And third is Anantam. Anantam means not limited by time, space, any object, any power, or any form. Nothing can contain Brahman. Yeah. Space cannot limit it, time cannot limit it. It's not that it has a limited capacity, it's unlimited. So therefore, Brahman is not finite, it is unlimited reality. So this is how we understand Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, Brahman. So this is absolute truth. This is what we should be searching out for. Tattva-Jijnasa is researching and realizing this Advaya-jnanam or Param Satya. Param Satya means absolute truth. What is that absolute truth? Advaya-jnanam. Now, Advaya-jnanam can be realized in 3 stages. So Bhagavatam does not leave the definition of ultimate reality as something abstract. Satyam, Jnanam, Anandam. No. It says it is Abhikya, Swarat, and it is a personality. And it defines Satyam Param in the first verse by chanting Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So Bhagavatam makes that Brahman into a conscious, independent reality. So while Upanishads give us the definition, Bhagavatam is giving us the personality, the activity, and how can you access that Satyam Param? Yeah. So Bhagavatam is making it more personal. So Prabhupada starts by saying that the absolute truth is both subject and object, which means no qualitative difference, advaya, non-dual. There is no in-out for absolute truth. It is non-dual, non-dual substance, which means object and subject are the same. So therefore, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagwan are qualitatively one and the same. Okay. So let's look at this slide to understand it better.
Prabhu, so are we talking
Yes,
about the impersonal Brahman now?
not yet. We are just
So
defining.
all this that we described is seems like impersonal Brahman, like it's
We'll come to that. We will
consciousness
come
and
how
all.
it is approached in different views, but now we are defining the ultimate reality. First, let's define what is absolute truth, and then let's see how it can be approached. So first, we are defining this ultimate reality, Advaya Jnanam. So we are saying Advaya Jnanam is that absolute truth in which the object and the subject merge. Yeah, there is no difference between the knower and the known. Hmm. Yeah. So there is no observer and observed. Jnanam Gyeya, chapter 13 of the Bhagavad Gita. So, Advaya basically means don't conceive of any difference between, in that absolute truth, don't conceive of any difference. Subject object is not there. There is no difference between the Lord, his Shaktis, his actions, his abode. It's all absolute. In this world, it's relative. Yeah. In this world, there is the knower, which Srila Prabhupada talks about, that the knower is superior energy of Krishna. And the known, Prakriti, is the inferior energy of Krishna. But in the absolute truth, the knower and the known are of the same superior energy. This is the difference. But because we are also part of Krishna's superior energy. But because we come in touch with inferior energy, we get illusioned, which creates a false sense of relativity. So there is duality in this world, but there is the nature of absolute truth is the opposite of relative, or what is duality is absolute and non-dual. Yes, Prabhu, we are yet to read this. I'm just starting to share the concept, but let's read the purport a little. So we saw that Advaya or non-dual means no difference between subject, object, name, quality, form. No, it's all one, absolute. So therefore, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan are qualitatively one and the same. They are realized as impersonal Brahman by the students of Upanishads, as localized Paramatma by the Hiranyagarbhas or yogis, and as Bhagavan by the devotees. So are the Jnanis, yogis, and bhaktas realizing different things? No, they are realizing the same absolute truth in three different features. Yeah. But Bhagwan is the complete realization. It contains both Brahman and Paramatma. Paramatma is the localized representation, and impersonal Brahman is nothing but the effulgence of the personality of Godhead. So, an example is given of a train that from a distance you can just see light. So, that's Brahman realization. When it comes closer, you see, oh, there are actually many coaches. There's an engine and there are coaches. That's more localized realization. That's Paramatma realization. And when the train finally arrives at the platform, you see, oh, there are people. There's a driver, and there are people going in and out. That is Bhagavan realization. Or we can see the same in the analogy of the sun. The rays of the sun are compared to Brahman realization. That's the first experience of a transcendentalist. When we begin spiritual life, and especially if we are trying to understand the absolute truth by our own endeavor, we reach to this idea of a Brahman conception. Yeah, because there is no positive attribute mentioned. For positive attributes, you have to take the source from scriptures. Brahma Samhita, Srila Vyasadev's Samadhi, they describe the features of Bhagavan. So the sun rays are like Brahman, the sun disk, the sun planet is like Paramatma, and then there is Surya Narayan, the presiding deity of the sun, which is like Bhagavan realization. So it takes a candidate closer and closer to the perfect understanding. So sometimes these students argue in favor of their respective realization, but those who are Tattva Vida, those who have realized the truth, they see that they are arguing, but all these three features of the same absolute truth are just different perspective, different views seen from different angles of vision. If you're standing on top of the mountain, you will see a certain view. If you're at the bottom of the mountain, you'll see a different view. So there is no need to argue about that. It's, do you want to have a better realization, or do you want to complete your realization? So which Where do you go? That should be the question. Okay, so Srila Prabhupada says that in the first verse of the first chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, the supreme truth is self-sufficient, cognizant, and free from the illusion of relativity. So, yeah, what is non-dual means there is no difference. The slide we just saw, there is no duality, there is no knower and known. In the absolute truth, both the knower and the known are one and the same thing. It's difficult to conceive because that's not in our common experience. In the relative world, the knower is the living spirit, yeah, whereas the known is the inert matter or inferior energy, Kshetra, Kshetragya. Therefore, there is this duality of inferior and superior energy. But in the absolute realm, both the knower and known are of the same spiritual energy because everything in the absolute realm is spiritual. It's a manifestation of the Lord's internal potency. So there is no difference between the energy and the energetic. But there is a difference of quality of energies. Yeah. In the absolute realm, the living entities, the absolute realm and the living entities are of the same superior energy. Both are conscious. But the material world is inferior energy. So even though we are spiritual energy, we being in contact with Prakriti for a very long time, we start to identify with it. This contact is what is called conditioning. And we start to think that I belong to this inferior energy. Yeah. So that is where relativity comes from because there are two energies operating in this world. Therefore, there is duality. But in the absolute world, in the absolute realm, there is just one energy. Therefore, everything there is absolute. So when we say that there is no difference between Shakti and Shaktiman, that is what is indicating Advaya. Because as soon as we say there is a difference, that means that is going against the definition of Brahman. How can there be two? It has to be non-dual. So whether it is the difference with oneness between the divine and his Shakti, Shakti could be both Jiva and Prakriti, yeah, which we have discussed before. So Paramatma is a localized representation of that absolute truth. Bhagwan is the complete personal manifestation of that absolute truth. And Brahman is the general manifestation or the first step of realization of that absolute truth. Yeah. Any questions? Yes, bro. Yes, please.
Prabhuji, means I'll ask the question, Prabhuji, but I'm also not sure. It feels little like a pedantic question, but uh, this means to me, Prabhuji, like whenever this topic comes of knower and known, there is no difference. I
Mm-hmm.
either it becomes for me like I have to accept, okay, they are different, you know, then there is a possibility of exchange of rasa or any talk like that. Or else if they are, if because I am the way I see it, okay, yeah, there are energies and all, but the observer in the way I think of it is I am trying to observe Krishna or I am trying to get a relationship with, develop a relationship with Krishna. So how is it possible that there is no difference between me and Krishna? Like there is a difference, right? There, I mean,
Mm.
the oneness aspect to me has never made sense. Like it seems to me like it's just duality. What is the oneness?
Mm. That's a good question. The oneness is that, Bhagwan possesses a form of pure consciousness. That's what we have discussed. Jnanam, Anantam, Brahman. Yeah. And that same Bhagwan is having a servant served relationship with the Jiva eternally. So we have to, address this tension that while Bhagwan is non-dual, the servant served relationship, which is eternal, does not challenge this non-duality. Does it make sense? That
Uh,
yes, there is a verse, here, let's look at it further. Uh, Advai, first we are trying to understand how it is Advai because Shakti and Shaktiman are one. And the Lord is not completely different from the Jivas. He is unique, but not completely different because ultimately Jivas are also distinct amshas only of the Lord. So the difference is not like such a big wall between the two. Lord is unique, but not completely different. So that is where it doesn't become strong dualism or Dvaita. While we are parts and parcels of the Lord, we are like Him, and He is unique. He's unlike any of us because no one can have the same position as the Lord. So that is the meaning of Advai, Asamurdhvam. So while we are very much like Him in nature, we cannot equate Him in stature. So, and then to that you add qualities. So where we discuss Anantam, Jnanam, Satyam, Jnanam, Anantam, that is a generic definition of absolute truth. To that we add the Shad Aishwarya, that yes, the Lord is non-material, so these attributes also belong to the Lord, which are Aishwaryasya, Samagrasya, Viryasya, Yashasa, Shriya, Jnanavairagyos, Chaiva, Shannam, Bhaga, Iti, Gana. So what we are doing here is that we are saying that there are these positive attributes of the Lord. They are non-material. Yeah. Why? Because we just discussed that the Lord's form is pure consciousness, jnanam. So these attributes have to be non-material. So what is the tension I'm trying to present is, although there is eternally a difference between the Lord and the Jiva, yeah, is there a servant-servitor relationship? Yes, it is there. But is the Lord also absolute, non-dual? Yes. So the difference between the Lord and the Jiva is eternal. In the Skanda Puran, there is this mention that the devotees are not destroyed even at the time of pralay. So we are eternally existing, which means Lord's servant served relationship is also eternal. And along with that, he's also non-dual. So how do we resolve this? That this eternal difference does not violate non-duality. The jivas are amshas of the whole. That is the oneness that we want to present. As amshas, jivas are partial aspects of the whole only. Does it make sense? We as jivas are parts of that whole. We share our identity with the whole. Yeah, and we are completely existing within that superior spiritual energy. So, in that sense, we are with Him, but in terms of our relationship, that individuality is also maintained. Does this address your question?
Thank you, Prabhuji. I'll have to think about it.
Hmm. So we don't emphasize the importance of oneness a lot, but we have to balance it. We are not in Dvaita Siddhanta also. Yeah. We are in Achintya Bheda Ved. It's simultaneously both. There is difference and non-difference. So if we only talk of the non-difference, then the potential that you are of the same nature as Krishna's, that will be lost. Can you imagine you can have the same experience of bliss in connection with Krishna? So that comes from oneness. Your nature of Satchit Anand is the oneness feature. So we have to equally emphasize the oneness feature, the non-difference also. We cannot just leave it at difference. Yeah. Otherwise, there will be a distance created between Jiva and Ishvara. Whereas Shastras are saying Jivas are actually included in the Ishvara. They are of the same spiritual energy. They are as parts, they are part of him. What does it mean to be part of the whole? That means non-difference. But yeah, that is, when you stretch it to the extreme, that goes on to become I am only that God, which is not what we are saying, which will be Shuddha Dvaita.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yes, you have a question?
Hare Krishna. So I'm trying to just make sure that I'm understanding this correctly, because this is very deep. So are we understanding? And I think before the question, I'll just refer something that Sri Radhanath Swami had answered in a question I had asked him. Is that we live in a world where there's so much self-hatred and self-rejection also. I mean, like on the one hand, there's a lot of ego and arrogance and all of that. On the other, there's also a lot of, people feel very less than or unworthy or undeserving in many places. And then that, Sri Radhanath Swami had beautifully responded, saying that, each one of us has a spark of Krishna in us. So while, Krishna is everything, but each one of us has, so how can you hate that spark of Krishna inside yourself? So I just found that very beautiful. That's a very beautiful thing of it. My question after I complete this thing is going to be, is the most superior relationship with Krishna one of servitude or one of prema? And what would Krishna want us to be most, as someone that loves him, or someone that serves him? And there need not be conflict. So, which brings me to this whole question. What I'm understanding is, previously in our limited understanding, we have tried to pin the absolute into one concept, either the absolute supreme that we merge with, that is formless, or the form that we pray to, but is separate from us. And I think what this verse is saying is that Krishna is this and that. Krishna is both. Krishna is everything. And so therefore we need to have a relationship with Krishna in both and all of these ways. Is that what we're trying to arrive at through this verse?
While, what you presented addresses the question Prabhu just asked. He said that it's difficult for him to wrap his head around the idea of oneness. So yes, the spark of Krishna, there is a spark of Krishna in each of us. That is oneness. So how can you, devalue yourself in any way? So if we only harp on the difference, then the risk might be to end up demeaning the jiva too much. Whereas the jiva is actually an amsha of Bhagwan. So there is a spark of Krishna in each of you, in each of us. So that is the oneness. And you have to feel that proximity to Krishna. Yeah. And at the same time, you maintain our individuality and that eternal relationship of served and the servant. This is the delicate balance this verse is telling us to maintain. And servant, loving and serving is non-different. So when we say serve, that is again love. So you can love in many flavors, as a friend, as a servant, as a parent. So all of that is rasa. But the foundation of every rasa is dasya. So dasya is present in madhurya, dasya is present in vatsalya, dasya is present in sakhya. So, dasya has to be there. That's the foundation of love. So it's not separate from it. And what we are being present in this verse is to understand the nature of the absolute truth, Sri Krishna, as absolute, yeah, and accessible according to our situation. He can meet us where we are. So for a Jnani, he will be available as an impersonal Brahman. It's still Krishna. Yeah, for a yogi, he'll be available as the Lord in the heart, Paramatma, but it is ultimately Krishna. But it is said that, then these are different paths. All paths don't lead to the same end. On the Gyan Marg, you will approach Brahman. On the Yog Marg, you will approach Paramatma. On the Bhakti Marg, you will approach Bhagwan. So the practice changes, the mood changes, the methods change. So what we are presenting is Bhagwan is the complete realization of that absolute truth, and that Bhagwan feature can be approached through bhakti. That is the presentation. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, we touched upon a few points, and I'll repeat it because, it's important. And just stating it once might not, help you capture it. First, we try to understand what is Advaya means. Don't look at it as difference. There's just absoluteness in the ultimate divine. So there is no qualitative difference, no difference between knower and known, no difference between Shakti and Shaktiman. Yeah. Why would that happen? Because they are all in the internal potency of the Lord. Therefore, everything is qualitatively the same. We don't experience that because in our world, there is a mix of two energies, superior and inferior energy. Yeah. So our understanding of relativism is created because we switch between two energies. Therefore, we see difference. But in the absolute truth, there is no two. There is only spiritual energy, and there is no illusion. Yeah. In our conditioning, we think that we we start identifying with matter. That is what creates the duality. But in the spiritual realm alone, there is no duality, there is just one. And yeah, I think I can share this. Or else, okay. So that same Advaya Gyan, you can have a look at it here. So think of that Advaya Gyan as there is a prism, and that Advaya Gyan gets refracted into three. You can see it as impersonal Brahman, or the localized Paramatma, or Bhagwan. But those who are learned, they know that these are different features of the same Advaita. And what is Brahman we saw? That those who are on the path of Gyan, they approach Advaya Gyan as Brahman. Brahman is pure consciousness. That's it. No form, no distinction, just unbounded, pure consciousness, like the rays of the sun. And there is a verse quoted in the purport that in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Lord Himself says, by my mercy, you will realize my power, known as the impersonal Brahman, which will be disclosed in your heart. So this is a authorized level of realization. Although it's not the highest, it's still an authorized level of realization. The next is the Paramatma realization. So while Brahman was pure consciousness, unbounded, Paramatma is particular or localized. Paramatma is present in our heart, where therefore, we are enlivened. Similarly, Paramatma is present in the universe. He's pervading the universe as Paramatma, which is keeping the universe alive. And that is compared to the localized, like the sun planet. And there is a description of Paramatma feature in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. We'll come to that soon. What is the dharana ashray of the yogis? What are the yogis putting their dharana or meditation on? It is the Paramatma. And the complete realization of Advaita Gyan is available in the form of Bhagwan, which is infinite form of knowledge and bliss, but with infinite non-material qualities, Aishwaryasya, Shreyasya. So it doesn't stop at Jnana, it goes on to gain it goes on to gain non-material qualities and a non-material form. That is the conception of Bhagwan. Okay, so the six opulences. And then we discuss the tension between acknowledging that Bhagwan has to be absolute, but Bhagwan also has a eternal relationship as a served and servant. So isn't that served servant going against the idea of non-dual? No, it's not. Why? Because the jivas are amshas of the whole. They share that identity with Bhagwan. They are existing in the spiritual energy. So there is no separateness. Jivas are also Krishnas. So while Krishna is absolute, non-dual, still he can maintain a servant relationship with the jivas who are part of him. That is how we understand. And this is, if there are further, here Prabhupada says, okay. Mm, yeah. So what is the hierarchy between the three? That is the last part of this presentation. So we understand there is through the prism that Advaya Gyan gets refracted into three. But is there a hierarchy? Yes, there is. Let's look at this. They are not all equal. And there are, verses to state that in the Bhagavad Gita. First thing the Lord talks about Brahman is Brahmano hi pratishtha aham. I am the basis of Brahman. This is in the 14th chapter. Yeah, and in Srimad Bhagavatam, we'll see in the 8th canto. So Sri Krishna is saying that you will realize my power known as impersonal Brahman. So that is one of Krishna's vibhuti. It is one of Krishna's, effulgence. It's Krishna's Shakti. But who is there? Is there a basis to that Brahman? Yes. Krishna is saying, I am the basis of Brahman. So Brahman's basis is Bhagwan. Brahman is not independent. Then what does Sri Krishna say about Paramatma in the Bhagavad Gita? In the 10th chapter, Sri Krishna says, how much of my energies can I describe? I have described so many to you that of everything splendorous you see. Yadyat vibhuti mad sattvam srimat urjita evava. Anything splendorous, magnificent, beautiful that you see is but a spark of my splendor. I cannot explain all those to you because just by my one portion of Paramatma, I pervade this entire universe. So, this is how Brahman and Paramatma are nestled within Bhagavan. And another way to see how Bhagavan is the superior understanding of the absolute truth is that those who worship Brahman and Paramatma, they do not attain prema. Yeah. Only the devotees attain prema. So in the sixth chapter at the conclusion, the Lord Himself says that of all the yogis, a devotee is the highest. Yeah, yoginam api sarvesham mat gatena antaratmana. Because by the paths of jnana and yoga, you will not attain prema. But by bhakti to Bhagwan, you will attain prema. So Bhagwan is a more fuller, complete, final realization as compared to Brahman and Paramatma. Okay. So this is the beautiful presentation of these powerful verses that we conclude by understanding that Advaya Gyan is Bhagwan. That is what we have to realize. He is the source of all his energies in the form of Brahman and Paramatma. Yeah, he is the final word in God realization, which culminates with prema. Okay, so there is those who are realized seers, they can see the synthesis. For those who are immature, they argue for their point of view. But we have to see the synthesis of it all. Okay, so we'll conclude here. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhuji.